I'm Jason with Level Up Investing, and this video is Buying a House 101. It is the 21 critical steps involved in making your first home purchase. And so this video is really meant for the first-time home buyer, but the principles can still be used if you're buying a second, third, or fourth property or a commercial property, but it's really meant for the first-time home buyer. So my wife and I have achieved financial independence through smart personal finance, investing in real estate, as well as stocks and businesses. So looking back at our first big investment, which was our house that we were going to live in, it was definitely a daunting task. It was very nerve-wracking, and we were inundated with information and just really overwhelmed. So if I had this video back then, I think it would have helped shorten our learning curve so that we could get through that process much better. So here it is for you. It's the 21 steps to get through the home buying process. So let's get right into it. Okay, so here we are at the desktop, and let's begin. So Buying a House 101, 21 steps. So you'll first notice 21 steps sounds like a lot. I've gone online, I've looked at some different numbers of steps, 7 steps to buying a house, 10 steps, but I found that those steps were rather not detailed enough, and these 21 steps are based on experience, so let's go into them. Okay, so the first step is, number 1, get organized. So what do I mean by that? Get organized, meaning get your finances organized. You can do that long before this whole process even starts, but you definitely want to have all this available before you start talking to people. So get organized. For example, you want to have your taxes from the past year. Sometimes the lender will want the last 2 years, but you definitely want to have that. You want to have if you are employed, pay stubs. Sometimes they want to have the last 2 months of pay stubs. If you're self-employed, you want to have some indication of your income, so most likely your taxes, or maybe a 1099 if that's what you get, 1099. If you're independent contractor, you also want to organize really what cash you have available, so you have an idea of the down payment that you can manage. And then what I would always do is I always start a new file on the desktop, create a file, just to make sure everything is in the same place so I know where to go. Sometimes you got to quickly get to things. So get organized is the first step. Okay, the next step is to contact a lender. And the main reason for this is so that you can have a pre-approval letter that you're going to use when you start looking for a property. So a lot of times going to your bank, the one that you know already, the one that you have a checking account in, sometimes that's the easiest place to go because they already know you. They have your financial info already, and based on that, they can go ahead and get you started with this process. So contact the lender. If you don't have a bank that you are already working with, sometimes the easiest route is to go with a large bank, but sometimes going with a local bank, a smaller bank, sometimes that could be more beneficial. So you make a couple phone calls, but contact some lender that can eventually get you a pre-approval letter. Okay, the next step is for that lender to run your credit and to review your finances. So this credit score is very important because then that gives the lender an idea of what their risk is and what their risk tolerance is going to be when they loan you for the property. And then the finances that are going to be reviewed, for example, your monthly income will be reviewed, and also in addition to that, like we mentioned earlier, your cash, how much you have available, and that'll give an idea of your down payment. So when you take all these into consideration, the income, the cash, your credit score, all that together tells a bank what is the likelihood that they would loan you for the mortgage. Okay, step number 4 is you've got to obtain that pre-approval letter. This letter, pre-approval, this letter, when you have this, first of all, when you're working with a real estate agent, a lot of times they'll want to see this letter. They'll ask you about it because they want to know basically, are you serious? Are you a serious buyer? Or are you just kind of kicking the tires, kind of going on the weekends and looking at properties? They want to know if you have the likelihood of closing the deal. So that's why it's important to get a pre-approval letter early on. That's why it's early, step 4, before you even talk to any real estate agents. Not having a pre-approval letter, a lot of times that'll put you lower on the list of priorities for agents. So you don't want that. You want to get a good agent and you want them to take you seriously. So definitely get that pre-approval letter from that one lender who has already run your credit. You want to get that letter as soon as possible. Okay, the next step is step 5, find an agent. So now you have a pre-approval letter. You are serious. So that way when you call these agents, they will take you seriously. Ways to go about it is the most common is word of mouth, right? Or you can look up an ad, or you can go online and look at reviews. Many ways to find an agent. Probably the best way I'd probably recommend is word of mouth. Ask your friends and family if they've recently bought a house or within the past year, and who did they use and what was their experience. There's no replacement for that type of a referral. So word of mouth is probably the best way if that's available to you. If you are moving to a new job and you don't have any family or friends in the area you're moving to, then sometimes you want to ask your employer if they have someone that's within the organization who helps place new employees in homes. And usually that person has some type of agent contact that they've vetted and who have done well in the past. Otherwise, previous employees would have told them, forget it, don't go with that person. So that's usually pretty good. So word of mouth and your network is key to find the buyer's agent. Okay, next step is step number 6, buyer's agreement. This is also known as the buyer's broker agreement or the buyer representation agreement. So what this is this is a contract between you and your agent, and you have to come to terms with your agent before you talk to anybody else. So chances are your buyer's agent will bring this up pretty early on in the course. So some things you need to know about the buyer's agreement, some things to keep in mind. You really want to know the terms of the agreement. In fact, you can even ask the agent, hey, what are the terms? And some of the things they're going to look at is this going to be what they call an exclusive right to as their agent, as your agent. So basically what that means is you are agreeing that agent is representing you as the buyer, and that when that deal goes through and is completed, then that agent is entitled to the commission that goes with the deal. And that happens, they have that usually because a lot of times then someone will be buying with an agent, and then weeks or months go by, and then all of a sudden the person buying finds a new development, and then there's an agent there that says, oh, I can represent you, we can get it done, and then the buyer just signs with them. Well, the agent you're working with will want you to sign this in the beginning to make sure that no matter what the deal is and where it happens, that agent is going to be representing you and is going to be involved in the deal. So what's the exclusivity? Also, the length of time of this agreement is important. So sometimes it'll say that the agent is your agent for 6 months or a year. You determine that. Some people will only have an agent for 24 hours. They'll have it for a week, something like that. So you really want to know what's the length of the time what's the length of the exclusivity. So those are the types of terms you want to know. Some other things to think about in the buyer's agreement. Remember, as the buyer, you're not really making an agreement with the agent themselves. You're making an agreement with the agent's brokerage or their broker. That's why it's also known as a buyer's broker agreement. So the brokerage may have some rules. For example, they might have a buyer's fee, where you have to pay a certain amount, whatever that is, $500 or whatever, that you're going to have to pay at the time of the closing of the deal. Well, that's something to watch out for, because as the buyer, you need to know that all the fees, all the commissions are coming from the seller. All right, that's standard. So unless it was, standard unless it was determined otherwise, but that's generally how it works. So for the buyer's agent and the buyer's brokerage to ask you to pay a fee, that's very specific to the buyer's brokerage. I 100% recommend you avoid any fee. You shouldn't be paying anything as the buyer in this deal. So keep that in mind. The commissions really are supposed to come from the seller unless you specifically agree to something different. So be wary of any buyer's agreement that has a fee that you pay to your buyer's brokerage. The other thing is that for the representation, you want to make sure that you are number one, that the buyer's agent is only representing you, and so that's you right here, and this is the seller right here. You want to make sure that they're not representing the seller too, that they're only representing you. So that's really important that you have that in writing, because then that way you know that the buyer's agent is having your best interests in mind and not some type of balance between you and the seller. So that happens sometimes. And just so you know that there are some instances where an agent will represent both. There's certain criteria that have to be met, and a lot of times in commercial real estate that happens pretty frequently. But if you're buying your first property, it's very recommended that you have a buyer's agent that is representing only you. Okay, the next step number 7, find that house. So you want to keep in mind things like location. They say location. Well, that is important. The location of that property is very important, because you want to think about the neighborhood, and then what else? You want to think about the traffic patterns, because if you're going to be living there, and then depending on where you work, you want to be real careful with what kind of commute you're gonna deal with. That could have a significant effect on which house you're going to select. So you want to look at the size of the property. Think about the needs that you might have for you and family, if that's the case, and the number of rooms and the number of bathrooms. So you want to have all that thought process in place as you're looking to find a house with your agent. Okay, the next step is number 8, and that is the seller disclosure. So by law, the seller is supposed to disclose any issues with the property that they know of. And there's a document called a seller disclosure. So once you've zeroed in on a property that you want, then the first thing you want to do is you want to look at that seller disclosure if they automatically say something that they know of. Like, for example, they had issues with the roof and the roof had to be repaired 2 years ago or something like that. Or if there's known water damage, that kind of thing. The categories are yes, there are issues, no, there are not, and I don't know. So you want to take a really close look at that, because that'll help also determine if you're going to go for a property, and also if you are going to go for it, what you really want to focus on when you're doing the inspection. So always review the seller disclosure. That is a critical part of your due diligence. Okay, so let's say you've looked at the seller disclosure and you want to go ahead. This is the time to make an offer. So you and your agent will comprise an offer in writing, and that offer will have several key factors involved. It will have the offer price as compared to the list price. It's what you're offering. It gives an indication of your contingencies, which I'm going to go over in just a second, which are important parts of the whole process of due diligence that you have to go through to buy the property. And when you're making the offer, it's always a good idea to take that pre-approval letter that you have received earlier, and then submit that with your offer, because then that shows that your offer is strong and that you are serious. So especially if there's multiple offers coming in, if a property is very desirable. So those are the things that you want to think about as you're making this offer. Definitely you're talking to your agent about all the key points. These are just examples. So all the key points of the offer, you want to go over that in good detail with your agent. Okay, so now that you've made an offer, the seller may send you a counter offer. So now you are negotiating. You want to negotiate the price. And this is a critical step because very often the sale price, the final sale price, a lot of times does not change after the initial negotiation. You might talk about seller credits later on or other things like that. But you really want to negotiate this price well in the very beginning, because a lot of sellers will not want, once they get a number in their head that they're willing to live with when they sell the property to you, a lot of times they can't get that number out of their head. So you really want to negotiate well. This has a lot to do with the kind of market conditions, the number of competition, other buyers. What's the inventory like, meaning the number of houses for sale that are similar to this one. So the negotiation is important. Again, this is where having a really good agent is very important, an agent that is negotiating on your behalf. So definitely keep this in mind, that you will be negotiating well into this process, but this is a critical point. Okay, step number 11. So let's say you found the property, you've negotiated, and now you have an executed contract, meaning everyone has signed and agreed to the current terms, including the contingencies and the sale price. So this is the time for you to shop for lenders. Okay, so you might be asking, well, I thought I had a lender earlier. Well, if you're, as a savvy home buyer, you talk to the lender in the beginning to get that pre-approval letter. That is important, and that's what you have to do. But that is by no means, and this is important, that is by no means a guarantee that you're going to work with that lender. And lenders, they know that. A lot of times they will want to get you a pre-approval letter because they know it's a foot in the door, and that chances are you're gonna work with them. If they give you a pre-approval letter early and made it convenient for you, you might reciprocate and go with them. Well, keep in mind that no, you're not obligated to go with that lender. Now that you have an executed contract with a agreed upon sale price and how much down payment you're going to be putting down, now is when you want to talk to multiple lenders. Go back to that first one, lender that you spoke with, but then talk to other lenders, talk to other banks, not just banks, but also mortgage brokers. A mortgage broker doesn't lend you money; they find someone else that can lend you money. So you want to be able to look at all these different options, and sometimes you can take numbers from one lender, and so you might have lender number 1 right here, and then you want to go to lender number 2, and then there's number 3, and then let's say you have some terms here. Then you show that to lender number 2, and lender number 2 might give you 3-star terms, and then you show them number 3, and you get the idea. And then sometimes you got to go back and forth. My wife is an expert at this. She has worked with multiple people, and it's amazing how she'll get the best terms with these lenders. When we talk about terms, we mean things like interest rate and points and those things. So So remember, you have to shop for lenders. Don't necessarily take the one that gave you the pre-approval letter. That is very important because the interest rate that you get from these lenders, um, you know, a quarter of a percentage point, or even less, can have significant dollar value in the long run, especially if you can do a 30-year loan. So this is a critical time for you to get the best rates that you can. So definitely shop for lenders at this point. And one more thing to consider when you're shopping for lenders, make sure you do two things. Number one, you are doing it all on the same day. So as soon as you get that executed contract, you want to do this that next morning, same day, and do it early in the day. So like I said, you want to be able to talk to multiple lenders. The reason why it's same day is that once one of the lenders pulls your credit, then pulling your credit, you take a small hit on your credit score. But the key is that if you get multiple lenders pulling it at the same day, you only get one hit because it's all in the same day. So that's why it's really important to start early on that day, and that way everybody is getting the information on the same day, and you're not getting multiple hits on your credit score. So that's a key tip. Okay, next step is step number 12, and that is to secure the loan. So basically what that means is you need to pick one of the loan options, and then you got to get that started. So basically the lender you call the lender and you say, hey, I'm going to go with you. They're going to say, that's great. Then they're going to send you some documents. Whatever they need you to do, you got to get started on that day, because there's so many potential hangups when it comes to the loan. There's a lot of steps involved. There's underwriting, there's appraisals. There's a lot of steps that could really slow things down. And several of our deals, we've had the possibility of slowing down and delaying the whole deal because of the loan. So when I say secure the loan, I mean pick one, run with it, pick the best terms, and call that lender and get things started, because they're going to want to start getting a lot of your information that you haven't given them yet. They're going to want to get that, so that's going to take some time. So do that right away. Okay, the next step is the inspection. So this is one of your contingencies. The first one that we talked about was the financing contingency. The second one is the inspection contingency. So in your contract, you will designate how long of an inspection period you would like to have, and that is a negotiation point between you and the seller. But the inspection is it is also a very important step, because the inspection does a couple of things. Number one, it tells you about the status of the property. When a professional inspector really goes from top to bottom, in and out, and gives you the best evaluation. Having a good inspector, word of mouth is really the best way to get one. Someone who's going to be very thorough. What I always also recommend is that you go in person and actually go to the inspection. Maybe not watch them do the whole thing, because that could be pretty painstaking. But I always ask to see them at the very end so they can give me the highlights, show me the pictures, so I know what to expect. And the reason why that's important is that the inspection is going to have a lot to do with your negotiation of this deal after you've really looked at a lot of the issues that you couldn't see when you first saw the property. So the inspection contingency is very important, and as you can see, it also has a lot to do with the bottom line as you're evaluating the property, and ultimately it's going to tell you if you're going to be move forward with the whole deal. So very important to have a good inspection. That too is something that you want to order right away. As soon as you get that executed contract, you want to get the inspection ordered, because sometimes the inspectors, the good ones, they might be out a few days to a week maybe, and your inspection period may be only 15 days or less. So you got to move fast on the inspection. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the next step is you're going to negotiate again. After you've got the inspection report, a good practice that I've done is I've actually taken the report and I have sent it to our agent has sent it to the seller's agent to review with their client and say, hey, you know what? We had this negotiated price. This was the price that we came up with, but oh, guess what? We have these things we found on the inspection, like the roof is shot, or there's some water damage, or you know what? There's probably going to be about, I don't know, $15,000 worth of repairs that we're going to have to do. So, let's be fair. Let's just drop the price down by let's just split it. Let's drop it by 10,000. That's just an example. Okay, you don't have to do that, but you get the idea. Is that you take the inspection and you use that as a tool to negotiate your price down even further. Because as the price goes down, then naturally the loan goes down, and ultimately your interest that you pay is going to go down. And overall, that's just much better for you, right? So this is your opportunity to negotiate again in this deal after the inspection is done. And once you're done negotiating, then you may talk about, if the seller doesn't want to drop the price, they may just give you a seller credit to fix these things. Hey, give me a credit for $10,000 because they don't want to drop the actual sale price. And then you got to make sure that you have to sign the addendum to the contract that your agent will have to obtain to reflect the changes, either the change in price or the change in credit or whatever changes there. So you got to make sure you sign that. Okay, the next step here is the appraisal. I say next step because I'm just giving it to you chronologically, but the reality is a lot of these are happening at the same time. So once you have selected your bank in a previous step, let's see, step number 12, you've picked the lender, you're getting things started. Somewhere in there, the lender is going to order an appraisal, which you're going to pay for, by the way, but they're going to order an appraisal. And what the appraisal is, it's a professional that comes in and essentially determines the value of the property. And they have certain specific methods that they have to follow to do this appraisal. And in your appraisal contingency, if you have one in your contract, it'll state that, hey, you know what, I'm only going to buy the property if it appraises for a certain value. Let's say the sale price that we selected was, or that we agreed on, was $200,000. Well, we'll only buy it if the appraisal comes back saying that the house is valued at least $200,000 or more. The reason why that's important is the bank wants to know exactly what it is that they're lending on. They want to make sure that the value is correct, because the bank, let's say it's a national bank, they don't know the local area, so they have to rely on an appraiser. Let's say that the appraiser comes back and says, nope, you know what? I think it's only valued at $180,000. So then you, as the buyer, are going to have to decide what you're going to do there, because the bank is going to say, you know what? Nope, we're not going to lend you on a sale price of $200,000. We're going to lend you on a sale price of $180,000 because that's what it's really worth according to the appraisal. So you are going to have to decide as the buyer if at the end of the day you're going to bring in the additional $200,000 if you're still going to go by that sale price. Are you going to kick in the extra if you're going to kick in that extra $20,000 difference in order to make the deal go through? So a lot of strategy there, but that's what the appraisal is for, so that everybody has what should be an impartial idea of the value of the property. And the bank's going to want to know that, and you are going to want to know that as you're buying it. Okay, the next step is step number 16, where you want to shop for home insurance. Now, keep in mind that home insurance is something that a lot of times the the bank will want that early on, sometimes a little bit later, but they want that because they want to know how much insurance is going to cost you per month, because they want to also sometimes they want to roll that into the monthly payment that you're going to have. It's called impounded. So you can shop for home insurance around this time in the process. And a lot of times you can get home insurance in in a matter of a day. You can just call around. So you want to shop for the home insurance, get the best deal, of course. And just like you were shopping for lenders, sometimes you want to call 2 or 3 of the insurers and try to work the numbers off each other. So home insurance is an important step right here. Okay, so you've gotten through the appraisal, you've gotten the financing going, you've done the inspection, and you're getting really close to closing on the deal. So at this point, step number 17 is when you do your final walkthrough, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You go there with your agent and you do a final walkthrough. You evaluate the property one last time, and the whole point of that is to make sure that that the property is in the same condition as when you first saw it, and that you're going to sign off on that. There's a document for that you're going to sign that says that yes, I agree that it's in the same condition and I want to move forward and close the deal. So the final walkthrough is important, especially after you've seen the inspection report and you know what to look for. You've also negotiated what you're going to be improving on the property, meaning in the form of a seller credit, or if you and the seller have agreed that they would fix something before the deal closes, this is your chance to take a look that yes, it was fixed and repaired to your satisfaction. So the final walkthrough is very important that you do that. Okay, getting close to the end. Step number 18 is the closing disclosure. This is the document that's sent to you by your lender that's supposed to be given to you 3 business days before closing, to give you an opportunity to review all of the lending terms that you had applied for, make sure all the terms are the same that you were told they were going to be, and gives you an opportunity to call your bank. And usually when a closing disclosure is done, it tells you that the bank is ready for you to close, that you're cleared to close. So it is really important to take a look at this closing disclosure in detail. You want to be looking at just some of the items, like the loan amount, which in most cases might be 80% of the sale price. That's just an example. The terms, like the interest rate and what your monthly payment's going to be and what's included in that payment. And also it's going to have what is a breakdown of your closing costs. And at the very bottom, cash to close. It'll have a figure there called a cash to close, meaning that's what you have to bring to closing to finish the deal. So it takes into account what your down payment's going to be. It takes into account a lot of the closing costs and any credits, and it's just a document that really summarizes what you're going to have to do to to close the deal. So cash to close is important. That closing disclosure is critical to review so you have a successful close. Okay, so now that you've reviewed that document, step number 19 is the time for you to gather your cash to close, like we just mentioned. And you, at this point, want to talk with the closing agent or the escrow agent, the one who's going to walk you through the signing and all the documents and make things official and submit the deed and all those things. So the closing agent, you want to talk to them because you want to know how you can how are you going to pay that amount. Is it going to be a check, a personal check? Usually not. Usually they want a cashier's check, but every closing agent's a little different. So we've done all different types. So that's important to know, because if they only accept a cashier's check, then you're going to have to go to the bank, your bank, and first of all, make sure all the funds are in there. You know what the cash to close is. You got to make sure all the cash is in there, obviously. But then you got to go to the bank and you got to find out what is their process for wiring funds. You want to get the instructions from the closing agent as to how you're going to have the bank wire the funds. You want to know the timing for the wiring, what's the deadline in order for it to happen, because the last thing you want is for everyone to be ready at the very end, and then your funds your funds are the ones that's slowing the deal down, because at the very end the deal goes through when the bank funds the deal, and that you bring your check. So you don't want that to be the slowing factor. So you want to go through all these motions. And again, when you talk to your real estate agent, they're supposed to walk you through all this to make sure this is all correct. A lot of times the real estate agent will also want to talk, know who your banker is, so they can talk behind the scenes to make sure that they have everything on the back end done. So this is called gathering the cash to close, and that's when you're almost done. Okay, so now you've made it to closing. So step number 20. So this is when an appointment is set where you go to the closing agent or escrow agent, the title company, so many names for them, but basically they're the ones that make it official. And you make an appointment, you go there, you want to make sure you know what you got to bring. A lot of times they give you instructions. You want to make sure you know what to bring, your ID, your cashier's check, if that's what it is, check, and whatever else that they want. You want to know all that. You go to that appointment, and that's when you sign all the documents. They review them with you. What's interesting with the closing is that most of the time, my wife and I will go to the closing, and then we'll just sign all the documents, and we're done. There was one time actually where the closing agent actually had the seller there too, him and his wife, and it was interesting because fortunately we had a good interaction, and there was no issues. But what if we had a lot of arguments back and forth? Then that would have been really uncomfortable. It was still kind of uncomfortable, but they were nice people anyway. So a good question to ask the closing agent is, hey, who's going to be there? Is this going to be us? Just so you're prepared and you know what to expect. I think very few will actually do this type of thing. Most of them will have the seller come at one time and then you come at another time. They usually time that based on when the funding is going to come in, that kind of thing. So that's the closing, and that's when you sign all the documents and you get official copies of them. And once that's done, then the closing agent submits that to the county records or whatever government records for the deed, and they walk you through that. And it's usually it could be a very lengthy process. Then again, it could be very quick, depends on the closing agent. So it'd be good for you to ask what's going to be that process. And finally, you're done. Step number 21 is when you get the keys to the property. After everything is done and signed and funded, you get the keys. You start figuring out how to move the utilities over, and then you move into the new house. So this is a really exciting time usually, and right around that time, actually right before this, that's when your agent and the seller agent, that's when they get their commissions dispersed, and everyone's happy and everyone moves forward and all that. So step number 21 is really finishing all these things. What's important to know is that you want to keep closing agent. You want to keep the contact info of the closing agent, because we've had some situations where the deed may have been slower to get processed, and then what happens is we bought our house and we had to do repairs, but the contractor did not want to did not want to submit a permit request until the house was actually under our name, and then the closing agent was slow to do the deed. So you want to keep tabs with the closing agent, have a contact person there. Generally, it's the person that actually walked you through the closing, but you want to have that. You don't want to just say, okay, I'm done, I don't have to worry about it. You want to have that contact person, because if any issues occur after the close, you know who can help you with that. So those are the 21 steps to home buying, buying a house. Especially, this would be useful, I think, if you've never bought a house before. You see that it could be a very complicated process, but you have to keep in mind that you're going to rely on a lot of professionals to make this happen, and you have to develop a good relationship with these folks. That includes your agent, the lender, the closing agent, the appraiser, and the inspector. So all these people are involved to make this process go. So you can see it can be complicated, but if you think about it in a stepwise manner, every step makes sense as long as you do that right and you work with a good agent that can help you throughout the whole process. Well, there you have it, the 21 steps to buying a house, or buying a house 101. And keep in mind that this is the first video in the Buying a House series. So if you like this content, definitely give us a like in this video and hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so you can get future videos on this series, but also on personal finance and investments. So I hope you can join on the next video.